walks away after winning his 100th game as the head coach here at Notre Dame.
The reason I was born with a silver spoon in my mouth, I was born in this country. It isn't what you have, it's what you're taught about the values of life.
We trying to save souls.
So there's a rule in life that you're either growing or you're dying. And like an old friend once said, we as Americans need to start winning again.
Everyone should ask this question. Am I willing to endure the pain and the suffering and the sacrifice it takes to be a champion?
Greetings and welcome to the Lou Holtz podcast. Each week we try to bring you a very interesting guest, but perhaps none more so than our guest today. Our guest today is a young lady by the name of Miss Paula Scanlan, who was a team member of Lia Thomas at the University of Pennsylvania. She has encouraged females everywhere, especially athletes, to come forward to tell their stories and make sure that people understand the experiences and the difficulties they go through and make their presence very, very important. And this is a subject we've talked about. It's a 90% subject in favor of the country, and why our country doesn't move to avoid these situations is beyond me. So let's just count our blessings. Welcome, Paula. You've been horribly brave to share your journey, to speak to Congress, and use a public spokesman about this issue. What brought you to this point and gave you the courage to speak out?
Thank you so much for having me on. It's been definitely an interesting journey in this entire situation. I mean, when I started sports, when I was a young child, I never imagined I would be in a situation where I would have to compete alongside a male athlete, undress alongside him, but also have to deal with the burden of speaking out and being vocal about this.
We're watching the destruction of women in this country. We're watching young girls be put in harm's way, and that was really why I knew I couldn't stay quiet any longer. And that's really why it's so important for us to empower the next generation of women to stand up for ourselves, because if we can't speak up about it, we can't expect anyone else to.
And ultimately for me, what it came down to is I realized I had two options. I could be part of the problem or part of the solution. And staying silent for me was being part of the problem. And so I really had no choice but to speak out against it. And we've been able to make such great gains since this happened. We have an executive order banning men from women's sports. We have many states have now passed legislation to also ban men from women's sports.
The administration will not stand by and watch men beat and batter female athletes. From now on, women's sports will be only for women. In recent years, the radical left has waged an all-out campaign to erase the very concept of biological sex and replace it with a militant transgender ideology. With my action this afternoon, we're putting every school receiving taxpayer dollars on notice that if you let men take over women's sports teams or invade your locker rooms, you will be investigated for violations of Title IX and risk your federal funding. There will be no federal funding. With this executive order, the war on women's sports is over. We are restoring sanity and common sense, defending the rights and safety and pride of the American people, including our great, great, great female athletes.
And so this journey has been really interesting. And again, it's something I never would have imagined I would have had to be in a situation where I've had to talk about this. But here we are, and I encourage everyone to use their voice and be brave and fight against the insanity happening in this country.
Well, I admire you. You've given up a lot personally to speak out on this issue. What role does sports play in your life, and why is this so important to you?
Sports did so much for me. I'm dyslexic, and so at a really young age, I struggled in school, in elementary school, and I watched a lot of my peers get ahead of me in reading and writing and those types of classes. And sports was a place where the playing field felt even to me. It didn't matter that I was behind my classmates in the school. In the classroom, I had sports to help elevate me. And on top of that, once I got to high school, sports taught me really valuable skills like time management, how to be part of a team, how to work to accomplish something. And I think sports are important for everyone. And really, again, what motivated me to speak out was thinking about young girls.
Now we're seeing so many different young people speak out. I mean, actually, just with these girls in West Virginia, They are in elementary school and they were forced to compete against a boy in track and field. And all of them stood together and they forfeited their events. Why are they taking a stand for this, but we have people in Congress that can't even vote correctly for it? Those young girls are able to be leaders in their community, and they're heroes. Polling shows it's almost 85% of people agree that men shouldn't be in women's sports. So that includes people on the left, but they're still not even willing to vote that way. And so that is really what opened my eyes to why it's so important that young people speak up, and why it's so important that when you're faced with something that you see, that you say something about it.
And the opportunities that they might lose if they have to compete against male athletes, or they feel discouraged to continue to compete. And I just knew I had to do it. And again, sports really shaped me into the person that I am today. And swimming really grounded me and taught me so much. And I'm just exactly who I am today, again, because of my opportunities in sports. And that's why young girls also need these same opportunities.
Well, it's hard to believe that I'm older than I look. I didn't think that was possible. But I remember when we passed Title IX. I was against it. You know, we had to cut coaches and cut people on scholarships in order to help women. As it turned out, it was one of the best choices that this country ever made. And so, what kind of backlash have you received from the community and your fellow athletes? How's it been harder than you anticipated? Because you think it's a no-brainer, but people fight us.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of people who are very engulfed in liberal ideology and don't want people speaking out against this. I mean, I've had teammates tell me that I was a horrible person for speaking out against this. I've had friends that told me they never want to speak to me again.
They brought in psychological counseling, advising us to make an appointment with them if we were uncomfortable with the situation. In my mind, that's almost equivalent to re-education.
While that has happened, there is actually a lot more support than we even know. And I think even people that are on the left side of the spectrum still don't agree with this. And so this issue actually really is unifying. I mean, the majority of Americans, polling shows 79% of Americans agree that men do not belong on women's sports teams. And even 67% of Democrats agree with that as well. So this issue actually is much more unifying. And I have received a lot of support in speaking out. And I've heard from a lot of people I never would have imagined agreed with me on this. People that have been lifelong Democrats or people that have had varying political views are with us on this. So it really is much more unifying than the left wants us to believe.
Well, it's really amazing. As I say, I remember when Title IX first went through, it turned out to be one of the best things that ever happened to women's athletics. Now, the left says they are part of equity, diversity of thought, and free speech. But I've personally seen the opposite. In my experience, they fight everything, and why, I don't know. It's a common sense issue. What has been your experience with this?
Yeah, definitely. It is a common sense issue. I mean, my university silenced us, and they told us if we ever spoke out against it, that we would regret it. They said if we spoke out against Lia Thomas being on our team, that we would never be able to find a job. They told us that not wanting to undress in a locker room with him 18 times per week was equivalent to not wanting to undress with somebody based on their race in the 1960s.
To sum up the university's response, we, the women, were the problem, not the victims. We were expected to conform, to move over, and shut up. Our feelings didn't matter. The university was gaslighting and fear-mongering women to validate the feelings and identity of a male. As an attempt to voice my concern about the situation we were forced into, revealing the unjust and unfair treatment, I wrote an op-ed for the Daily Pennsylvanian, the student-run newspaper. I approached this from a scientific, statistical perspective where I used my engineering background to discuss how Y chromosomes cannot be changed by any surgical procedure or systemic therapy. This biological fact lends itself to athletic advantages that cannot be mitigated by lowering testosterone levels, which are readily apparent in sports competitions and locker rooms. The Daily Pennsylvanian published my article on the evening of February 10th, 2022. Only a few hours later, my piece was retracted. I was given no notice nor reasoning. Again, I was silenced for my dissenting viewpoint and felt my First Amendment rights were denied by my university. This is representative of a greater issue, the destruction of free speech. Today, any discussion maintaining the sanctity of women's spaces is labeled transphobic, bigoted, and hateful. What's bigoted and hateful is the discrimination against women and the efforts to erase women and our equal opportunities, dignity, and safe spaces. One might ask, why do I speak so passionately about issues that seem hypothetical, or some may perceive as only impacting a small number of women? This is not hypothetical. This is real. I know women who have lost roster spots and spots on the podium. I know of women with sexual trauma who are adversely impacted by having biological males in their locker room without their consent. I know this because I am one of these women.
The administration also told us that we were hateful and bigoted if we didn't enjoy this or like this or support it. And the last thing that they told us was they said, if you still have a problem with everything that we've said, here's the number for psychological services. Please go make an appointment because you are the problem and you need therapy. And that is what we were told every single time we tried to raise concerns about this. And again, the university did not give us any opportunity to talk about this. It was, you had to support the stance that they had. And if you didn't, then you were the problem and you needed help.
Well, the way they try to silence you is by making you feel that, hey, you're wrong on this and you're a bigot and you're very, very selfish. But I personally know that we have to stand up, and why more people don't, I find hard to believe. What are the next steps you'd like to see happen, both in the government and private sector, in order to support or to protect every woman in this, to give them the right to excel and to contribute to society?
Yeah, I would love to see this passed federally. I mean, right now we only have an executive order, and unfortunately, Democrats in the Senate did not want to vote on our side on this issue, and so that's what we're dealing with.
On this vote, the yeas are 51 and the nays are 45. 3/5 of the senators duly chosen and sworn not having voted in the affirmative. The motion is not agreed to.
So I would love to see that happen federally. In terms of life, I mean, I think we need to get back to a place where we can have conversations and we can agree with people and disagree with people freely. And I think that's what's missing in the private sector. I think a lot of people are still feeling censored by their, whether it be their university or whether it be their corporate office. There are people who are still afraid to voice their opinions because they fear that they might be fired, or they might lose opportunities at work, or they might be disliked by their coworkers. And so that's something we still have to work on in society. And I think we're making great strides. I really do. But again, we have to keep doing that. And the best way to keep continuing to do that is have people be vocal. Don't be afraid to share your viewpoint. Don't be afraid to have someone that sits next to you disagree with you. And I think that's really where it starts. So it starts with all of us collectively, not just people in the government and not just people like yourself, Coach, who have a wonderful podcast.
I know you do that. And people are so unforgivable. In other words, how could anybody be against a woman having the opportunity to compete in the sport on her own? But yet it happens. And do you find that many of your teammates are scared to come out?
I haven't really been in touch with many of my teammates, but what I do know is majority of them agreed with me privately one-on-one, but when it came to the group or when it came publicly, they pretended like they had a different opinion.
There was a girl on the team who was a bio major. She was very liberal, and she said, I'm a biology major and I understand biology. Like, I don't think this is fair. She told me that one-on-one. She would never admit that to anybody else, and I'm obviously not going to name her. There was conversations like that you could have all the time with people, but when you'd come to the group, the whole entire group would say, no, of course I'm supportive. This is the most amazing thing that's happening. This is progress.
So I do think there is still a lot of fear, not just on my team, but a lot of people that are in this boat where they truly believe that this is wrong and they know that this is wrong and they have a very strong viewpoint, but they lie about it and pretend that they have an opposing viewpoint.
And that's what's so scary is when there's injustice in sports, people talk about it. But this is an issue that's happening in front of everyone's eyes and no one is speaking about it.
And so that's sort of what we're seeing in this country. And that is exactly why we're in this situation. People are afraid to say what they truly believe. And that is exactly how we got into the situation that a man ended up on a women's swim team to begin with.
You were there when President Trump signed his executive order to protect women's sports. What was that moment like for you in the Oval Office?
It was so awesome to be there. I was so grateful, again, to President Trump for keeping his promises. He campaigned on this and he got it done very early into his presidency. And so I was forever grateful for that. But what I will say is it was in ways bittersweet. I mean, the thought of having the most powerful man in the world have to waste his time and sit there and sign an executive order to say something as common sense as men do not belong in women's sports was just mind-boggling. And so when I really walked away from the experience, of course, I was grateful to be there. And it was a wonderful day of celebration and really, really a great representation of all the work all of us have put into this. It was, in a way, a little bit bittersweet because, again, really we have to waste a sitting president's time to do something so common sense as say men do not belong in women's sports. It just shows how far this country's fallen in a lot of ways.
Well, you find the country's going the wrong way is because people don't use common sense. That's all it is. What's right and what's wrong. It's wrong to keep women from competing in their sport. It's wrong. And yet we have people stand up. When I see guys get up, or women get up also, and complain about waste, fraud, and abuse, and yet I hear other people say, well, that's wrong. We should have all this. It's insane. You think, where in the world is the common sense in their mind on it? What are the next steps you'd like to see happen in this?
Yeah, again, I mean, I would really love to see this passed federally, but I think really what we're running into now is blue states are fighting back against this. They're not following the executive order. They're trying to say, come here and we'll let the boys play on the girls' sports teams. And this is happening in elementary school and middle school and high schools in blue states like California and Washington and Oregon. Even the Maine governor, fought with Trump a little bit on this. So we're really starting to see a divide between blue and red states. And I would like to see legislation passed in blue states to prevent men from competing on women's sports teams. And unfortunately, if we don't have it in federal law, it is up to the state level to pass legislation. So we're going to have to get into these blue states and fight for legislation there, which is going to be challenging. But unfortunately, this issue won't be done until we are able to do that.
How long have you been competing in swimming?
So I started swimming at age 8. And so from 8 years old to until I was 21, I never had to compete against a boy. And then all of a sudden, my senior year of college, what was supposed to be my last year of college, there was a man on my team competing against us, practicing with us, going to our meets and undressing in our locker room. And that was definitely not how I expected to finish my college career, and really a very long career in swimming that was over 10 years of competition ended with me competing with a man on my team.
Oh, I can understand how frustrating. What's the next step you'd like to see happen both in government and the private sector in order to protect every girl and save women in sports?
Again, yes, we need everyone to really just speak up on this. I think really how we got into this situation is because people are afraid of saying what they truly believe. So this starts with everyone. Speak up, speak the truth. And yeah, we do need to pass legislation federally at the state level, but also just bring back having conversations about this because the majority of Americans agree. People are just not afraid to say it. So just be that person who starts talking about it in your community, and you'll actually find that the majority of people do actually agree with you. And having everyone come together, that's really how we're going to make change.
Well, Paula, I want to tell you, you're very well educated, you express yourself very well, and you're a great spokesman for this. Well, what advice would you give to girls who are currently dreaming about this issue? What would you tell them if they had to compete against boys on their teams or on the opposing team? What do you say to people when boys are on the other team and you're at such a disadvantage?
Yeah, I mean, I hope you don't have to deal with it, which is why we're fighting so hard for this. But if you do, speak up and be vocal about it. Boycotts have worked really well. So if you can get everyone to boycott together, I think that would be really effective. But what I will say is don't lose hope.
And I know a lot of these people who are struggling with gender dysphoria have either never had a relationship with God or have lost faith in God. And I understand that, again, with everything I've gone through, but it's realizing why you're put in the situations. I think it's really reflection and also being grateful for the positive things that have happened, right? So even though you can have this really negative experience, you always have to look around and say, okay, well, this really positive thing, and something that I found really positive was having a strong family. I have 2 parents that are together. I have an older brother who's great. I have a large extended family, and having that, and I've always had that, and I will always have that. And that's something that really got me through. So, I mean, you can always look around and see what it is that you do have and what God graced you with, even when something negative is going on.
I mean, we have all experienced this, and it's become so common. Just know that we do support you. America First Policy has done wonderful things to support these female athletes and all athletes. And so there are a lot of organizations like them that have supported kids going through this. So just know we are here for you. We will support you. And I'm just so grateful for all of the people that have supported me in speaking out. And I'm in a position now where I'm able to support female athletes that are going through this themselves. And that is something that is so valuable. And I'm grateful to be in a position where I can help people based on my experience.
You are leaders. You're doing the right thing, and you're setting up other girls to not have to go through this, because they can point to you guys and say, the Roanoke swim team did it, so can we. And that is so powerful, and if you ever doubt for a moment that you're on the wrong side of this, you're not. You are a leader, and you will be on the right side of history, because standing up for girls and standing with women and protecting girls' sports and girls' spaces is never the wrong thing.
What I took away from the experience was my coach was laughing. And that's when I knew that he also knew that the situation was wrong. He also appreciated the humor of the situation. And that honestly gave me a little bit of hope to know maybe I'm not completely crazy, because whether or not everyone was willing to admit it around me, everyone knew that it was wrong and knew that it was, again, completely insane. I mean, there's really no other way to explain the situation, just insanity.
It is completely crazy that I could be charged with sexual harassment for saying Lia Thomas is a man, but him flashing me 18 times a week in our locker room doesn't constitute as sexual harassment. I mean, I make it make sense, and that is what they were pushing. They're saying it does not matter, and if you don't accept a man undressing in front of you, for some reason you're bigoted and hateful and you're the problem.
And so, again, keep fighting and be vocal, and I think that's really what this comes down to.
Well, you're making a big change in this voice, and just keep speaking out. But you also do it very, very well. How many brothers and sisters do you have?
I have one older brother.
Well, I tell you what, your parents have done a great job with you. What advice would you give to girls who are still fighting this issue with men in the locker room, etc.? What do you tell them?
Yeah, I tell them to use their voice. And again, don't be afraid if people might not like what you have to say, because it is worth it to fight for. And one thing I usually leave when I talk to college students, what I leave them with is if you are not willing to stand up for it yourself, how can you expect anyone else to? And it really does come down to that. If you're not willing to take a stand and speak out against what's going on your own sports team, you can't expect someone else to come in and do it. And that is what I saw firsthand when I experienced this in college, is that I kept on waiting and feeling like I was my university or the NCAA was going to step in and do the right thing. But of course, they never did that. And that is why it was so important that I spoke out and that I talked about what I was experiencing. And so that's the advice, is if you're not willing to speak up for it, you can't expect anyone else to. So be bold, be strong, and stand up for what you believe in.
Well, you express yourself very, very well. I'm an old man, and I'm 88. And I have difficulty walking and doing different things, but I have great respect for people who believe in a cause and stand up. And not only should you believe in a cause, your cause is absolutely right. And it's insane that we allow this to happen. Now, the whole purpose of this show, which I've been doing for a couple of years now, is how do we bring back the culture to this country? The culture is what made this country great. And what happens is we allow so many people to come in and not expect us to adjust to their culture, the way they do things in their country. And that's not the way it should be. You go back to 50 years ago, the immigration, you had to pledge allegiance to this country, and you couldn't be a foreign national promoting one side and against the United States. That's not the way it is. That's not the way it was supposed to be. And unfortunately, I don't understand how we get this back. Do you have any idea how we bring back the culture of this country?
I think we bring it back by starting conversations and getting comfortable with people not agreeing with us. And so I think that really starts in just being bold and saying what you believe. And I think when you start to do that, other people will feel like they're able to do that, and then they'll empower more people and more people. So I think it's really just being honest and having conversations and again, standing up for what you believe in. I think that's how we're going to make change in this country.
That's very insightful. I will say this, though. I see so many things going on in this country. You think, how in the world can anybody possibly support that if they have an education, if they were taught to right from wrong, and if they were taught to love this country, to believe in this country? And yet, time after time, when people are all for abuse and wasted in country government, and they get mad when somebody tries to do something about it, I don't understand that. Why? I wish I could be in their position for just a month to find out what caused you to think that way. I just can't believe it. But in any event, thank goodness we have people like you that speak your mind and your voice. And if I give any advice to you as an old man, don't change. But believe in what you're doing and stand up for it. And like Grandma used to say, the hell with them. We can't do it. We can't do other things for everybody, but let's just be part of this country. And every citizen has an obligation, like you have done, to speak your mind on what's right and what's wrong, and not to be intimidated by other people that try to force you down. So your courage is great. You're a very talented person, a very beautiful person, I might add, but also you express yourself so eloquently. So God obviously put you in this position to utilize your talents and abilities to make a difference in people's lives. Thank you so much for all you've done, and thank you for being here. Enjoy your day at America's First Policy Institute. It's a great organization, and they'll put you to work, though. I promise you that. You speak too well, and you present yourself so beautifully. They're going to put you to work, but thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. And I'm so appreciative of you for, doing this and giving me a platform and having conversations that some people maybe don't want to hear. So I have always looked up to you, and I appreciate all that you've done.
Well, I've just had 3 rules. Do the right thing so that people can trust you. And it's not right to one man in a women's locker room or men competing with women. And just do what's right. It's not complicated. Rule number 2. Do everything the very best to your ability. Not everybody can be all-American. Not everybody can be all. Everybody can be the best they're capable of being. And rule number 3, show people you care. I'll say this. You're never again going to meet anybody in your life that need a smile, a kind word, and encouragement. And the one thing that's hard to do today, but is important, remember, when people need love and understanding the most, Paula, it's usually when they deserve it the least. You remember that when the lefts go flying off the handle, and they're completely wrong. But they don't care about this country. They don't care about the people in it. They don't care about our future, and that's unfortunate. So thank you for being here. God bless you.
Thank you so much.
And he walks away after winning his 100th game as the head coach here at Notre Dame.
The reason I was born with a silver spoon in my mouth, I was born in this country. It isn't what you have, it's what you're taught about the values of life.
We trying to save souls.
See, there's a rule of life that said you're either growing or you're dying. And like an old friend once said, we as Americans need to start winning again. Everyone should ask this question. Am I willing to endure the pain and the suffering and the sacrifice it takes to be a champion?